Hello. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a fun time. We're going to be talking about what we can do with sergers, and not just, the top of the line sergers. So there's a lot of things we can do with all of our sergers, even sergers that are, older. The new ones are a lot more fun, but it's something that we can do a lot of different things. Now, my goal today is to inspire you to try something new with a serger, and you may not know what you can do with a serger. So I'm going to go through quite a few things. I've actually got more than 20, so let's see if I can make it through in the hour. Because I am going to be showing so many different things, we're not going to do a lot of actual stitching with our serger, but there is going to be a poll that's being added in, and you can find it up in the heading, where you can fill out what techniques you want to see. So as we're going through this, and remember, I'm saving some of the funnest techniques for the end, but as we're going through this, if there's a technique you'd really like to find out more about, then make a note on the poll, and you can add more than one. You can say, I want to see 4 things. And then what'll happen is, once it's done, I'll make some videos to show you how to use those techniques. So make sure to comment, make sure to ask questions. We've got wonderful helpers today, and Meredith and Amy are here, and they're going to help keep me on track. And also, if you've got any questions, they're going to make sure I know about it. So make sure that if you want to find out more about things, that you fill out that poll. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about, one of my favorite things to do with a serger, is to quilt, to piece a quilt, not just, quilting it. Although that is something you can do, and you can get some neat results. Toward the end, I'll show you an example of how you can applicate and quilt with a serger. But for right now, we're just talking about piecing. All right. So this is a log cabin. It's kind of like a crazy log cabin. It's a scrap quilt. It's made from a jelly roll. And one of the things that I love about a serger is how nice and neat the back looks. It's just, there's no threads, there's no hanging around. And the other thing that makes quilting with a serger nice is it's faster. So a friend of mine used to make king size quilts. She would make a king size log cabin, and she could do it in a day. She had the practice of doing multiple blocks, but she would do 20 blocks at a time. And it was amazing to watch how fast she could serge. And let me just show you a little bit of a close up. Look at how beautiful those seams are. No threads, no cleaning up the back once you're done. And because I used a 4 thread, it's also giving me a nice strong seam. And that's what it's all about as far as I'm concerned. I like the idea that I can use the 4 threads. Not only am I getting a nice straight, even seam with all the threads gone, but because I'm using 4 threads, I have 2 needles. One needle that's on the edge of the seam, another one next to it. And I'll show you on the serger in a second. And then I have the upper looper, which goes back and forth, and then the lower looper. So there's 4 threads there. That makes a very, very strong constructed quilt. Another thing that I like to use when I'm for my serger when I'm quilting is, and I just did this small little sample, but you know how you get your whole quilt together and it's all quilted, and then the edges are all raw and rough and you got threads and everything. Before I add my binding on, I always go and serge the edges so that I've got that nice smooth edge, and it makes it much, much easier to put a binding on. So we're going to head over to our Amber Air 600. That's the one that I have with me today. But I've also had a lot of experience with going back to the 936. And that's, I think, where I learned a lot of how to do this. So let me just go over, and we're going to go to the machine. And let me tell you, this Amber Air 600 is a spectacular serger. You'll notice that you're seeing all the words written of what stitch I have selected. And if I wanted to change the stitch, I just go to the arrow, and then I have all of these options for threads, for types of stitches that I can do. But I'm going to stay with the 4 thread overlock. So I'm just coming back. Now, another thing that we've never seen on our sergers before, well, a few things actually, is that we have the ability to select the fabric that we would like to use, and then everything about that stitch changes. So right now I have it on a woven heavy. I'm going to change it to a woven light, because I'm working with fabric that's like quilting fabric. And I could also choose woven medium if I wanted to. Everything about that stitch changed. The tensions have all their own unique tensions for the weight of the fabric and the type of fabric. If I was saying I was working with a knit fabric, it would change the numbers again. It would also change the differential, and everything is selected. Now, let me show you. I'm going to back up here a little bit. All right, and zoom out so you can see the whole base of the serger. Now, right now, because I'm piecing a quilt, I have a really interesting foot on. It's actually a blind hem foot, but it's got this nice bar right here along. Let me zoom in and see if you can see that. All right. It's got this bar. So when I'm piecing, all I have to do is line up my fabrics right side together. And I'm going to lift my foot up here and put my fabrics underneath. Now, when I'm piecing a quilt, I don't want to cut away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rest the fabric against that bar, just like an edge stitching foot on a sewing machine. And then as I sew, it's going to trim all the extra threads off, but it's going to give me that perfectly pieced seam. And you can feel how nice and fast it can go if I wanted to. And then if I was doing a strip piecing, I would just keep going. I wouldn't stop and cut the threads. I would just keep going and adding more fabric in there. Now, once I'm done, what you're looking at, and I think you can see this all right, I have one needle on the left. The second needle is in the turquoise, and then the upper looper is going on top, and then there's another looper on the bottom going on there. But let me show you just something quickly as I open up this serger. This is a cover stitch machine. It's not just a overlock, but it's a cover stitch. I'll explain a little more about that afterwards. But right here, this is our air threading, and it is super easy to thread our machines now that we have air threading. And another thing that's a little bit different is we also, I'm afraid to show you this, underneath my table might be dirty, we have a knee lift. So when I press the knee lift, the foot lifts up. And so then I put it down, it'll stop, which that's pretty cool. All right, I'm coming back because we're going to talk about a few other different techniques. And remember, ask questions if you want, and I'll try and answer as many as I possibly can. All right, so quilting is by far the funnest thing to do with a serger because it's quick and fast. But I do a lot of crafting. And so another type of thing that I like to do is working with finished edges. So some of you have seen this basket that I posted. You'll notice I do have a little fun little flower that I made. This was done with a 3-thread wide stitch, and I made an example here to show you. It's a Pelon product. It used to be like Timtex or something. They, I think, are now called Pelon. And I just did a sample of a test here. This is very, very stiff, which means that the fabric that I've got here that I did a stitch, all I did was I made long samples like this. It's fusible on the front and back. So I fused it into place. And then I did the stitch on both sides. And I used a yarn. This is a yarn. It's called Filane. It's by Sulky. You can use all different kinds of, you're going to see I've got lots of different fibers that I've used. But then once that was done, all I did was I wove them together and then I stitched along the top with the serger. The flower was done with a chain stitch. Now, as we go through, you're going to see I use the chain stitch a lot, and it can be very floppy like this. And you can see just what one of them looks like. A chain stitch can also do so many more things. Here is an example of what I did with a chain stitch. I made a necklace, and I did the chain stitch. This was a 3-thread rolled hem. I did this over a fishing line. So the fishing line, you can get different weights of it. The one that I used was a 12-pound weight, and luckily I live on the water, so I had lots of fishing line. But you can try with different things. But look at how beautiful that is. Isn't that gorgeous? So as you were going through looking at some of the different techniques. This was a playing just to make that craft basket for Easter. Here was another example of a quick, fast, easy project. This is the same Pelong product that's fusible on both sides. And what I did, you'll see it here, is I did that 3-thread wide stitch, the same stitch that I did on the basket, but I did it on the edge. So instead of having to put on binding, I used that 3-thread wide. Now this took me maybe 10 minutes top. Fusing the fabric and stitching the edge was 10 minutes. So a lot of the projects that I do with the serger are something very, very quick, because the serger can stitch fast, but also because it's finishing the edge at the same time. Look what a beautiful placemats that would be. These wash well, there's no problem washing them. And if you wanted to, you could even fuse some of that waterproof fabric on there, and that would be a nice finish too. So with the 3-thread wide, you can do some fun things. And with the 3-thread rolled hem or narrow hem, which is just a very narrow stitch, you can play around and get all kinds of different effects with that too. So I'll put that down. Let me just get out of my way. And let's go to the next one. Now, the next one that we're going to do is decorative edgings with yarn and thread. Now, well, here's an example. My necklace. All right. This was a necklace. We'll put it over here so you can see it on the dark. All right. And if I put it underneath the table, underneath here, I'll lay it down so you can kind of see it. So this was done with Madeira thread, and that's what it looks like. And I didn't have more than one spool of it, so I added the same yarn that I did for that basket. But it's a 3-thread rolled hem. Look at how gorgeous that is. Isn't that beautiful? I just love the effects that we can get by using different threads. We also have threads like this. This would be a Wonderful thread. It's there's a razzle and a dazzle. So when you're using a heavier weight thread like that, you actually are getting a much thicker cord that's very, very strong and very easy to work with. So I'll come back over here and put my necklace back on. Let's see. I think there's a question here. The fabric on the back of the placemat, they're both cottons, quilting cottons that are on that placemat. So one of them was a yellow print, and the sunflowers was just a sunflower fabric that I had at home. I love sunflowers, so you'll see me using sunflowers a lot. And then the end stitch that's on the placemat is a 3-thread wide stitch. 3-thread wide. This is a 3-thread wide stitch. You see how it finishes like that? This is done with the yarn, and so it kind of fills it in and gives it a really nice finished edge to it. All right, let's see what's next. So we've got a few more different things here. All right. This is an example of something I made with years ago. Okay. It's just a little scissor holder. And I used the cord. I kind of wove it together a little bit to make it looking, but you see, it's not very nice, right? Think about how much nicer this cord would be if you're going to use it. This is strong enough to use it for strapping. It's strong enough to use it for anything. This could be strong enough that you could use it on a bag for a strap on a bag, or weave them together. Now, one thing to know, and I'm not sure if Terry's the one asking that question about the dazzle, there is a couple of different things you need to consider. When you're using a thicker thread, like the dazzle and like the, this one, I'm not sure what it's called, Decorative. All right. Any of these thicker ones, the secret is you need to make sure to lengthen your stitch. Judy, it was Judy. I have the answer to you. When you're using these cords, we're setting them up for a 3-thread narrow or 3-thread rolled hem, but those stitches are very close together. And when you're working with a cord, or anytime you're using the razzle and dazzle or these heavier cords, then you need to make sure to lengthen your stitch length. I think if you give that a try, you're going to find it solves all your problems. And you can see how thick this is. So I probably shouldn't have used orange with the orange shirt on. But the stitch length makes all the difference. I didn't end up having to change the tension at all. All I did was lengthen the stitch length. Let me show you what it looked like. All right, over here, you see that? Actually, I'll put you on this camera. So you see how it all bunched together? When that was the original setting, and that didn't work very much. But the moment I lengthened the stitch, it gave me a beautiful look. So that's really the only thing that you needed to do with that, okay? So give it a try. And I did not put any special stitches. I didn't change the stitch when I used the decorative stitch. But every cord, every yarn is going to give you a different result, right? So if I'm using a yarn or I'm using one of these shiny dazzle or razzle fibers, I'm going to stitch it out just like I did on this one here. Here's a piece that I did. This was my test to see if I was going to like it or not and if the stitch looks good. So just do a test on the fabric you want to work with, and you'd be amazed how much that will help you decide what if you like the look to begin with. All right. And often I don't have two spools of the same thing. So that's why I've got to have some things that I can mix it with. So if you wanted a balanced stitch like I did on my necklace, then by using the same weight, it really helps a lot. And I also did this little bracelet here. Let me take that off for you so you can see. And I just wrapped it around. So this was just a cord, and you can see you can do all kinds of fun things with it. Same cord, and I just wrapped it around and put it on as a bracelet. And that was very easy to do. Even I made a tassel with it. And with the tassel, I kind of thought this could look kind of nice on the necklace. I could do something like that and add a tassel like that. All righty, let's see. Now, heavier cords go through the loopers. They only go through the loopers. And there was a couple of questions here about somebody using the heavier cords in the loopers. And she tried to tie it off and the knot got stuck. And yes, that's true. You cannot use you can't tie off a cord like that. But I do have some other things you can do with it. And I'm sure I'll show you some tips in a few minutes, okay? And let's just see. The thicker threads go through the air channel man. So that's all related to the heavier threads. I'm going to come back to that later. I promise you I will touch on how you use heavier threads in the loopers, okay? So don't worry, I'll come back to it. But I got lots more to show you first. All right, here is another finished edge. This is a 3-thread, just a 3-thread narrow thread, and I use Success yarn on this blanket. Now, this blanket's been around a long time. It's gorgeous. It washes absolutely gorgeous. This whole project, okay, it's just a toweling. And then I've got this little hood up here. It took maybe, I don't know, 40 minutes to finish it, right? All I did first was do the Success yarn here. And then I went all the way around with this. It's washed well. It's amazing how gorgeous that looks like. And yes, one of the questions we have is, can the woolly nylon be put through the air channels? Yes, it can, but it's a secret. I'm going to show you how to do it in a minute, okay? I'll come back to it. Now, before we go too far, I've got a couple of other things to show you. Many of you like the idea of having a blanket stitch along the edge of fabric. So this is an example of how you can get a blanket stitch on the edge of your fabric. All right. And so what you're doing when you're going to do a blanket stitch is you're going to make sure you're going to use a Flatlock stitch, and you're using a wash away stabilizer. I like the nice thick wash away stabilizers like Dissolve Away Max. And then all you're doing is you're laying that on top and you're doing a Flatlock stitch. And then when you open it up, you will see that you get that blanket stitch. Here's one that's much, much closer together. So if I like to do the blanket stitch, I usually want it to be farther apart so that I can kind of see that it looks like a blanket stitch. You can see the difference by just changing the stitch length, how much difference that makes. So Kim asked a question about the yarn. What do you mean by yarn? There are lots of, not the yarn that you buy in a skein in the craft store. There are lots of threads that have a yarn-like texture to it. This one is called filane. There's Madeira's got one that I've forgotten the name of it, but it'll come to me in a minute. There's all kinds of these different yarns that are on a spool for thread. You don't want to be putting thread that's a yarn, a ball of yarn that you're putting into your machine. That's not what I'm talking about. This has the appearance of thread, but it's thicker. All right. Yes, and Lee asked a question about tying off. I totally understand what you mean, but I don't want to answer it right now. I'm going to come back to that later on, okay? So don't worry about that. We're going to stick with this subject. Here is that Flatlock stitch that gives you the blanket look, and you can use it to sew two pieces of fabric together. So one is an edging technique, and so this is an edging technique, and then afterwards you just tear the tearaway away. This one you can use to sew two pieces of fabric together. Exact same stitch. The only difference is here you'll see that decorative edge in the middle, and here you'll see it on the edge of your fabric. Okay, I'm going to move on. We've got lots more to show you. We've already gone through 20 minutes, and you haven't even seen the most exciting things, okay? All right, now, another thing that we can use sergers for, overlocks. They don't have to be necessarily a cover lock, but an overlock like the 400 Amber Air is for heirloom work. Now, sewing heirloom fabric together and laces and trims, those fabrics are very delicate. And because we're using a serger with multiple threads, it really does capsulate all of the extra threads and stops it from tearing. This hat's been around for many, many years, and all of the lace has been sewn on with a serger. And I used a 3-thread rolled hem or a 3-thread narrow. Now, what you're seeing in the middle, all of these decorative rows of stitching, that's what a cover stitch is. A cover stitch will give you a lot more decoration instead of just sewing pieces together to get the seams covered. It's actually going to decorate your fabric. And I'll show you a little more of that in a moment, okay? All right. We have, and remember, these are all options. You can go into the poll and let me know which ones you want to see more about, and I'll make a video for the specific technique. Now, a lot of times we see these beautiful scarves. Isn't this gorgeous? This is silk, and I love this. It's so light and so soft. A 3-thread rolled hem would just fall off the edge because this fabric is so delicate. But when you do a 2-thread rolled hem, you've got this nice, soft, beautiful edging to it that just gives you a very light finish. And so it's not heavy. And I think it's just gorgeous for any light fabric, very, very thin silks or organzas and things like that. That is a perfect stitch. It's a 2-thread roll hem for that finish. And here is the same rolled hem done in a different way. With this rolled hem, I've used a metal, wire. Okay, this one is very, very stiff. You can see how stiff it is. It's holding up. I don't usually use this stiff wire. Usually a 24 or 26 gauge is plenty. This one is much heavier than that. But if you needed it, you can see how well that holds up. And let's look at the edge. All of that edge is all finished. And that is a same 3-thread rolled hem that I used on the heirloom hat to finish those pieces off. And I'll show you a couple more of the rolled hem. And then we're going to go over to the serger and we'll talk about how you can work with heavier yarns and quartz. Another example of a rolled hem for a napkin. This is a 3-thread rolled hem. See how beautiful that is. I actually put 2 fabrics together to do that. And it makes a really pretty napkin to have the different colors on both sides like that. But a gorgeous, gorgeous rolled hem that really finishes off the edge nice. Not only does Carrie asked, does the machine manual come with a list of all these stitches? Not only does our sergers, our newer sergers, especially the Amber Air 600, it comes with a list of all the stitches, but it actually puts the settings there for you, so you don't need to do anything. Now, if you have a 200, a 250S or a 400, you would be able to refer to the manual to get the settings for those stitches. All right. When Sue asked about what thread I used on the silk, for the silk, I used a rayon thread in the top, and I used in the looper, the 2-thread looper. Remember, there's only 2 threads. So I used a rayon in the top, and I used the poly, let me see if I can pull it out. This one right here. It is a poly yarn. So it is very soft and very thin, but when you pull it, it stretches. And so it really wraps that rolled hem nicely and gives you such a beautiful finish. And you know all the fibers are caught in there because of the poly yarn. It does a nice job of wrapping. And okay, we're going to go through a couple more things, and then we're moving over. Now, one other thing that I love doing on my serger is gathering. All right. So this is a 4-thread gather. Look at how beautiful that is. If you like gathering anything, if you're making curtains or you're making a dress, the serger does a much nicer job of gathering. You can decide how far apart your gathers will be, and they actually have the ability to move that when you're gathering on a sewing machine, you don't have the ability to do. And another way of gathering is using elastic thread. There is a foot that is an elastic thread foot, and the elastic goes in the foot. And look at how beautiful that is. Isn't that nice? This works really well for doing waistbands in pants. And anytime you really need, like on a sleeve or something like that, the elastic just goes in, and it's just beautiful. So let's take a break for a moment, and we're halfway through. So I want to make sure to show you all the creative things you can do with a serger. But we're going to go over and let's look at the Amber Air 600, and we'll look at threading for those heavier threads. Okay. All right. So let me switch over here. Now, right now, I'm set up for a 4-thread. I'm going to open this up, and let's look at we have our threads in our loopers. I'm going to cut those threads, and I'll show you how the air threading works. And I need to lift up my foot here a little bit, get rid of that, and I'll cut my needle thread also. All right. So if you are going to be sewing and you want to use a heavier thread, there is a wire for. Right now, I'm on the Amber Air 600 right there. You see that? All right. There's a fine little wire that you can use to pull through the loopers. But first of all, let me show you how it works. All right. Because many of you have not seen how to thread an air threading machine. Right down below, I have my machine is set for a 4-thread. All right. But all I do to thread it for an air threading is I move this over here to the air threading, and I rotate the hand wheel. I rotate the hand wheel toward me so that the loopers lock. All right. And so now you can see the channels closed. Those were all opened. Now they're locked. And so when I put the thread through the air channels, it's just going to go all the way up. All right. And so here, the secret when you're doing the air threading, all right, I like to use my tweezers that come with it, and you're just going to put the thread an inch or 2 down. And what is important is let some slack here so that it's just going to sit and be able to pull through the looper. Now I'm going to go and get the second one, and I'll put the second one. You can do both of them at the same time. All right. So about an inch down. And then once you've got that, remember to pull some slack. Wait a second here. I pulled it out. I hope you can see this all right. All right. So I'm just putting it down about an inch. And then I make sure there's enough slack. And then all I have to do, wait a second. Oops, I just realized. So the threads go in here, and then I have slack, and all I have to do is touch this button, and when I do, magically, the threads appear over here, and they've threaded the loopers. Isn't that amazing how easy that is? There is no work to threading your serger. That is about as fast as you can thread loopers as you've ever seen. And let me just check and see if there's any questions, because I realize the camera might not have been perfectly on there. All right. Let's see here. Okay, a couple of questions about the poly yarn. This one is a superior thread one that I was using. All right. And Judy says her wire gets twisted. Any ideas? It's actually pretty easy to sort that all out. But there is a tiny thin little wire that you can get that comes with the Amber Air 600. And it might not come with the Amber Air 400, but I'm sure you can purchase it because it is a product that's coming with the 600. And what you do when you're using the heavier threads, like the yarns and these heavier, look at how gorgeous that is. Isn't that beautiful? See how heavy that is? All right. So when you're using these, you pull the wire through, you lock the channel, just like I showed you, you pull the wire through, and at the end, there's a little loop. So what you do is you put the cord through the loop. And the reason you can't tie a knot is because the knot is so bulky that it won't let you pull it through properly. All right. So I really think if you're going to be working with heavier yarns, you need to be using the wire to pull it through. I'm confident that you can buy those separately. There has to be. I'll get Meredith to check on that. But if it's not now, then it will be in the future, because I'm sure it's only a matter of time before we lose them, because I'm misplacing mine all the time. Let me see if I can find mine. I had it over there. I'll have to look for it and see if I can find it. So I'm going to come back a little bit more, and I will answer all your questions afterwards. All right. So one of the questions is, can you thread both loopers at the same time? Yes, you can. On an Amber Air 400, Amber Air 600, both loopers can be threaded at the same time. That's pretty cool, right? It does all the work, just instantaneous. All right, so here's another project that I did working with a 3-thread wide stitch. Remember the 3-thread wide stitch that I did on the basket? That same stitch, I used a wash away stabilizer, and I had the stabilizer underneath one row of stitching, and I'll show you what it looks like. So all I did was one row of stitching on a wash away stabilizer. I use the Dissolve Away Max. All right. I should put it in there. Then the next one, I put another piece of Dissolve Away Max, and I overlapped it so that the stitches are connected so they don't fall apart. And I used, actually, when I was doing this one, I was using the same blind hem foot because I didn't want to cut the stitch that was there first. And I've been kind of playing around. You see, this has got a nice twisty look to it. What I did at the beginning, at the end, is I used a narrow stitch. And then once I came up, I moved the lever for the narrow into a regular stitch. So it's starting out, it's going to be narrow here, and then it gets wider. And that is why you're getting this curled look. So I'm really kind of cool. I'm excited to see where I'm going to go with all of this, because I have no idea what this is going to look like, but I'm expecting that it's going to twirl. So we'll see what happens. But look at how beautiful that is. Isn't that just gorgeous? And this was my first attempt. In this case, I used a 40 weight rayon in the top and the bottom, whereas with this purple one, I'm using a 12 weight cotton thread. So it's going to be much, much heavier and much fuller looking than this one here with the rayon. The rayon gives it a nice soft drapey look. And all right, we'll pull over a couple more. We have the ability, because we have a piping foot, we can use our piping foot not just for making piping, but I used it to put the zipper in. Look at how beautiful that zipper is. Isn't that gorgeous? And that was done on a serger. I'll show you upside down. Look at how beautifully finished that looks. It is just gorgeous. So anytime you're looking for a really nice finish, This, in this case here, I used a 3-thread wide, exactly the same stitch that I used here, exactly the same stitch I used for here, and exactly the same stitch that I used for the basket. I just changed my threads. Instead of using a heavier thread, I just used a regular sewing thread. And you can see if you look at it, it just looks like a 3-thread wide, but just using regular thread. Okay. And I'll move all these things. And now what's next is, I know it seems obvious, but making garments with a serger is a miraculous thing because you save so much time. I made this dress for my granddaughter with the serger years and years ago. At the time, she was a couple of years old, and now she's 7 years old. So it doesn't fit her anymore. But it held up. I made this dress in less than a day. And so I know it sounds ridiculous, but isn't it amazing to think that I can cut the fabric out and sew this together? This pattern is a butterick pattern. It's 1821. But when you look at the underneath of it, it still looks brand new. All the seams are gorgeous. It's washed incredibly well. And that's because I used the serger to put it all together. And this one's been washed 100 times for sure. Now, just recently I made another one because I love the pattern so much. And this one I made it a little bit bigger. And I love this because the back and the front are the same. So you can make the dress go from the front to the back. But I love this hem technique. What I do for the bottom of the hem is I just fold a piece of fabric on the bias and then I stitch it to the bottom. And this works on just about any hem. So you can get some really nice finished results from doing that. Yes, Jamie, the lime green scarf is just stitches. There is no fabric. I used a wash away stabilizer. Isn't it incredible the things we can do just by thinking, okay, what effect do I want? You can get it by using a serger. And in many ways, much more decorative than we sometimes do with a sewing machine. And so I'll show you another example. This was a vest that I did. All right. And this, again, it was just a simple vest. You can see I like the color orange. And this whole thing together only had a seam at the shoulder and a seam on the sides. Everything about this was done in about 40 minutes. But using a funky fabric, it gives you kind of a different look to it. Every time I'm working with a fabric where I'm sewing a garment, I'm always using a 4-thread. That is a guarantee because I like the strength. Same thing when I'm piecing a quilt. I want that 4-thread. Okay, let me see. Somebody wants to see that hem up close. Let me show you how that looks. Isn't that pretty? I did, because it's going around the curve, I did cut the strip on the bias, and I think I cut it 2.5 inches. So, and then I folded it in half, or maybe 3 inches, and then I folded it in half. So look at how nice the underneath is. Isn't that beautiful? It really is gorgeous. I'm just amazed all the time at the effects we can get with our sergers. All right, here's another dress, and this was done using elastic thread in the looper. Instead of using regular thread, I used elastic thread. And then the hem was done the same technique where I just cut it, folded it in half, and then I serged the bottom edge. But look at how pretty it is with that. I made this yesterday morning. It took me an hour. I cut out the fabric. I put the elastic thread in the loopers. Now, when you do that, the one trip when you're working with elastic thread is you need to make your stitch longer. All right. It needs to have almost like a gathering stitch. So I made the stitch 4 millimeters, and I probably next time would have done it 5 millimeters, and it would have gathered it even more. But what a fun little dress. And to be able to do something so quickly is pretty amazing. And I will post some pictures of some of these things afterwards too, if anybody needs them. All right. Now let's see our time. Oh, we're doing all right. Now we're moving on to some more creative things. This was a bag where I used the chain stitch. So this would have been on a cover lock. The Amber Air 600 is a cover lock machine. The Amber Air 400 does a 2-3-4 thread, and the 250S is also a 2-3-4 thread. But this decorative stitching is using all those same fabulous cords and yarns that I was using. I did use the Razzle and the Dazzle there, and you can see how shiny some of them are, and they go on the other side too. But more importantly, I used the piping foot to make the piping for this bag. And this is quite thick. This is a vinyl. That's quite a thick vinyl. But look at how nice that is to be able to sew the piping with your piping foot. Now, the challenge usually when you're making your own piping is getting this edge to be even so that the cord fits right underneath when you're sewing it and doesn't wave in and out. With the serger, when you're making piping, it actually cuts all the extra off. So you know exactly where that cord's going to go. And it is a lot easier to make piping with a serger sometimes than it is with a sewing machine, because you do get that nice finished edge and you know the cord is all caught in between there. And so most sergers do have piping feet. Ours certainly do. So you'll know to be able to find that. But I'll put it up close so you can kind of get an idea. Isn't that a fun technique? You can tell all the colors I love. All the colors of the rainbow. That's the colors I love. All right. Now, some things we haven't covered, and I'm going to go back over to our machine in a second. And I will, but I'm just going to show you these last couple of samples. This is an example of quilting with a cover lock machine. When you're using a cover lock machine, you can make appliques with your serger. So I stitched through all the layers. In this case, I didn't have a backing on the back, but I could have, and then I could be quilting it all at the same time. Don't you love that plaid look that you're seeing there? That is a cover stitch. The one that's more purpley, that is a wide cover stitch. And then the blue one is a narrow cover stitch. And then the very, very thin one, let me see, right there, the green one, that is what a chain stitch looks like. So that's all three of them together. So when you have a cover lock machine, you have an option to do a chain stitch, which is just give you a single stitch. And it looks decorative if you put a decorative cord in it. You also have the cover stitch narrow, a cover stitch wide, and a cover stitch triple. And I'll show you all the stitches on there when I come back over for a second. But I just wanted to show you another example of using your decorative threads. Look at how fun that is. In this case, when we piece the front, this is a project Wendy came up with. When you piece the front, instead of just doing your seams and not seeing the edges, you actually see that there's a decorative stitch, and you see the raw edges are covered by that decorative thread, but they're on the outside instead of the inside. All right, let's see, answer a couple of questions here. So did the stitches on the bag and on the applique and turn off the cutting? When you are doing a cover stitch, the blade is down, it's never up. All right. And I think I'm going to do some videos on the differences between cover stitch and overlock stitches, because I think that would be very helpful. But if you have a cover lock machine like the Amber Air 600, you sew on your fabric like it is a regular fabric, like it's a regular sewing machine. You cannot do that with an overlock. So the Amber Air 400 and the 250S, you can only sew on the edge of the fabric. But if you have a cover lock machine, then all of this is stuff you can do, applique, even the piecing on this silk. You see the leaf here? That was a piece of silk. And I started working with a sewing machine, but it was so ravelly and so hard to deal with that when I made the next one, I used the serger to piece it together. And then I appliqued it onto the fabric and used a cover stitch, a chain stitch to do that. So who would have thought that you could do all of this with the serger? Isn't it amazing when you think about it? So these are all techniques. I want to remind everybody, these are all techniques that in the poll, you can say, what is your favorite technique that you really want to see how to do it? And then I'm going to make a video to show you how to do it. So that's why it's important for everybody to go into the poll and select the ones that you think you'd really like to see some close-up instructions on, because I'm going to show you how to do that. The scarf, hold on a second here. See if I can find the scarf. Here it is. So somebody wanted to see the scarf again because they really didn't get to see it. And so I started in the middle, and you notice as it gets wavier, you can kind of control that by changing the differential, or you can just use a longer stitch length. There's a whole bunch of different things you can do with this, but it really is kind of stylish and different. And it's nice and light because it was done with the rayon thread. So I hope that helps you, give you a better idea. Now, we've got a couple more things. Here is a quilt that I'm making, and I love to work with different fabrics. This is a silk fabric, and you'll notice, you see all the lines down here? Those are chain stitches that I did. So I stitched them from the back, and then they've got that very, very heavy look on the front. It's a quilt in progress. Now, one more thing that I'm going to show you, and then we'll come back and we'll go over to the machine, and I'm going to talk about how you can do some of these things. So this was a project that I made working with organzas and different types of fabrics. It's a poppy, and I've got a few of them here. I'll show you a couple of different ones. Here's another one that was done here. This one's got a little bit lopsided. This one doesn't have as much. It's a little more floppy. And you'll see the button in the center. That's actually a brooch pin, and that is going to get pinned right into the center. So I could actually wear this as a brooch if I wanted to, because it does have a pin on the back side. And then this is another one that I use with fewer petals. So in here, this one I used 10 petals, and the center of this is a buttonhole, a button. You know the buttons like this, where you can make your own button. And I serged the fabric. This is a swimsuit fabric. I serged it with a chain stitch, and then I cut it out to go around the button, and then I added the Swarovski crystals for it. And so that is a really cool, you can see the Swarovski crystals are sparkling. I added a few beads to some of the others. And what I used for the outside of the poppy is a chain stitch. I just chained off black thread, and then I added a bead to the end of it, and that's what gives it that kind of cool look. Now, on the way this was done, yes, Carrie asked, is there wire on the edge of it? So the way I started this was I did a chain stitch. All right, you see how sheer this fabric is. I did a chain stitch, and this was the wrong side, and this was the right side. It's a little more decorative. And then after that was done, I cut out a shape that was just a basic semicircle. And then I put wire on the edge, just like I did with the ribbon. And so that's why these petals all can have a bend to them, because they've got wire in the edge. Aren't they beautiful? I just love these. I think they're so much fun. They can be added to a quilt. They could be added to, somebody was suggesting, for the next horse races that are going on, you could put that on one of your fancy hats, because they really are gorgeous, and you can see how fun they are to do. And I love this technique because it's kind of combining a technique that you could add these on a 3-dimensional art quilt, right? Very, very easy. You could add leaves and make all kinds of different parts to your quilts, and then just sew them on at the end. So let's go back over to our serger and look at the kind of stitches that are there, and we will see maybe some of your questions will be answered, okay? So believe it or not, I've already talked about more than 20 different things you can do with your sergers. I hope that if you don't have a serger, you're getting kind of interested in it, because it is pretty fascinating. But let's go back over, and I'm going to come back over and zoom out a little bit on my machine, okay? So up here, what is really fascinating about the Amber Air 600 is I know what thread I have selected. I can go and select the kind of stitch that I want. If I want to do a 4-thread overlock, this is very different from our machines that are not computerized. Our Amber Air 600 is exactly like our sewing machines. I can select the fabric. So if I want to work with a stretch light fabric, I can go in and select D, which is stretch light, And then all the tensions, everything about the stitch changes, just like our sewing machine does. And that's a very valuable thing that is really has been a Vermont, it has been a Husqvarna Viking exclusive for a long time. But I love the fact that we can choose our stitch. So if you keep going down, you can see all the different threads. If you want to do a 3-thread rolled edge, let's say I touch that. Now, it is showing me right away, I will not use the left needle. I'm only going to use the blue, the red, and the green. And everything is color coded. If you look here, you'll see there's the red and the green are in the loopers. And then the blue and the yellow are needles. And another thing that'll happen is you can go in and it will tell you if there's anything special. Like in this case, I'm doing a rolled hem. So that means that I'm going to need to change my stitch finger. So when I look down here, this is on normal right now because I was just doing a 4th thread. So because I'm going to do a rolled hem, I'm going to pull that back. And now I'm set up for a rolled hem. I'll close that up. And if I look at my tensions here, I can see that on my right needle is going to be 2. My upper looper is going to be 1.2, and my lower looper is going to be 6.5 right there. Okay. Now, what that tells me is there's nothing in the left needle. So that means that I need to take out the left needle, which is very easy to do. I'm just going to loosen it up and the left needle comes out. And I like to keep my thread usually in there while I'm taking it out because then I don't accidentally, it doesn't fall. But when you're looking at everything that your machine is telling you, your Amber Air 600 is telling you everything you need to know. Your stitch length that it's recommending is 1.2. Well, it didn't just tell you that, it actually changed it. So now that's ready to go. Your differential suggested at 1.3 for the fabric that I was working with. And then over here, you have your speed control. Now, when it comes to using, and I want to see if I can put my hands on that wire. Let me see if I can find that. It was there. Oh, here it is. So when it comes to using a heavier thread, if you're going to use a heavier thread, your wire that comes with this 600, you can see how fine that is, right? I'm going to cut the threads going to the loopers. And I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so you can see a little more about what we're doing, okay? So I cut those threads. And if I was going to take a heavier thread, like the, let's say I'm going to use a 12-weight cotton thread here, okay? So if that was going to be my thread that I wanted to put in the looper, I'll just change it out. And then I'll show you how this is done. Now, if you're doing a rolled hem and you want your rolled hem to be full, the thicker thread would be in the red and the thinner thread would be in the green. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put this heavier thread in the red thread because I've selected a rolled hem. Okay. And so this one is going into the red. Now, in this case, I'm going to need to do it 2 steps, one at a time. Right now, I have my machine set for threading, and the loopers are locked still. I haven't changed from that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the wire that does not have the loop on it, and I'm going to put it down into the hole. All right. And sorry, my hands are in the way there. And you just keep going until it comes out the other end. Now, once you get close, you're going to notice at the other end, and you may not have a good view of this, has got a loop on it like this. And so you're going to put the thread through it. Now, I do it at this point because I get so excited about the wire going through that I pull the wire all the way through here, and I've forgotten to put the thread through the loop. So I try and do that earlier on so that I don't accidentally forget. All right. And then just pull the wire down. And you're just kind of pushing it straight down. It's not It's not too hard to do. It is a very thin wire. And sometimes if I've been using mine a lot, so it does get kind of bent. So look at over here. Notice that? Look at, there's the wire. I don't even have to know what looper. It's just going to come in. Now, when I come back over here, you see the thread. All right, it's going to get pulled through. I didn't put a knot in it because a knot would cause it to be so thick that it wouldn't go through. So I'm just pulling it through like that. And then over here, you'll see the thread come out. So that's how you thread with wool and yarn that are heavier, like a 12 weight or an 8 weight. Let me see if there's any questions about that. Let's see here. Oh, I'll show you how to use save stitches. That's a good thing to show you. All right. And now, as far as the question about what needles do we use, there are needles that are meant for a serger. They're ELX, and I do have a package. I'll go over and pull them up for you to see. And but let me show you how you can save a stitch, because that's pretty cool. Like we had years ago the 936, and then we had the S25. But I have to say, this new Amber Air 600, it is just filling my life with joy. I love to be able to do all these creative techniques. And it's really got me excited again about working with a lot of these creative techniques. So you'll see a lot more of this, I think, coming from what we're doing. You're going to see a lot of education coming out. And I know I'm planning on working a lot. So if you're interested in a new serger, check it out for sure. And I'm going to come back to the machine and let's see what's going on here. So say I wanted to, and never mind what I'm threaded for, but let's say I wanted to do a gathering stitch. Okay. This is something you would want to save, because once you know what you've done, you can use a 3-thread or a 4-thread. I like to use a 4-thread for gathering because it's stronger. Now, what I know about gathering is I'm going to use the gathering foot, which it is an extra foot that you can get. And when you're looking at everything here, you'll see that the first one is the needle on the left, then the needle on the right, the lower looper, and the top looper. When you're gathering, if you're going to do anything, you're going to change the needle and make the needle have more tension on it. The more tension that's on the needle, the more it's going to gather. Oops, sorry. I'm very sorry. I just realized you couldn't see. So let me go and do that again. All right, let me come back. So when I've selected 4-thread overlock, if I look right here, that's my tension, and your needle is the first one. If you go back to where it was, you'll see it changes color. Look, there it changed color. So the original setting was 3.3. The two things I do when I'm gathering, well, 3 things. I put on the gathering foot. I usually will increase the tension in my needle because I like nice tight gathers. And then the other thing I do is I make a longer stitch length. When you're using the gathering foot, if you didn't change anything, you still would get gathers. But if you want nice tight gathers, then you're going to go and make your stitch long. You could make it as long as you want to. It goes up to 5. There we go. I don't think it'll go any farther than that. So if I wanted to save the stitch, all I do is I go over to this heart. See, I've already got some stitches saved here. And now I can save it right there, and it'll save it in my 3rd place. And then when I touch the check mark, it's a save stitch. It is so easy, much, much easier than it has been to save a stitch. And each of these are different ones that I've made adjustments for. And I just love that I can actually write down what it is. So see, it says my special stitch. Maybe I wanted to call it gathering. All right. So I can go back and I can actually write the name of what the stitch is. Isn't that amazing? To be able to say, okay, this is a gathering stitch, and recognize what it is. And then stitch. And now next time when I look at it, look at that. It says gathering stitch. That's so much nicer than just saving a stitch. You can actually name what kind of stitch it is. And then when you go to load it, you go up to the heart. I'm going to write over that. And then to load it, you go here. And that's how you would load the stitch. And you go to choose the one. That's the one I want. And there I've loaded that stitch. Isn't that easy? So if you are interested, let's see, we'll answer a few more questions here. So there's a question about the presser foot pressure. Oh, very cool. You guys are great. So yes, we do have on our machine the ability to change the presser foot pressure. When I'm quilting through layers like batting, I will lighten the presser foot pressure. But if I'm piecing, then I don't. Remember, we started the day just piecing? Well, it is the kind of an amazing thing that we can work with different weights of fabric. But if you're working with something heavier or bulkier, then on the dial on the left of the machine, I'll show it to you in a second, you can go and do that. Believe it or not, the hour is almost up. And I'm going to go and switch back so I can show you the dial for changing it. Right over here, this is the dial for changing your presser foot pressure. Normal would be here. I was working with something that I was working with some batting, and I had it up a lot lighter. And then if you want more pressure, you go down. But normal is where it usually lives. But I would never buy a serger that didn't have the ability to change the presser foot pressure, because that is really important when you're working with different weights of fabric. So what I'd like you all to do for me is, I know really you didn't learn a lot. You saw creative ideas. I would like you to go in and fill out that poll and tell me what are the most impressive techniques you would like to learn how to do. And then I will make some videos to show you how to do it. So I hope that you all had fun today. We have some Facebook Lives coming up. And so let me just remind everybody, May 3rd with Kathy Fromm. She's doing felting techniques for Mother's Day. And then my Sonette on May 10th with Mickey. She's getting to know the background wizard and the assistants. So I'm not gone yet, but I will be in a couple of minutes. But so we have one couple more questions. How do you keep your chain stitches from unraveling? Well, if you're going to be doing your chain stitches like this, remember this was this was not a chain stitch. This was a rolled hem, just very, very thin. But a chain stitch on my quilt, this would be a perfect one, is you can lock your chain stitch and also your cover stitches. There's a technique to lock it in so that it won't come unraveled. And maybe that would be a good thing to do a video on, because that actually would be something that a lot of people have a hard time knowing how to do that. But the other thing I also do is I usually have, and there's a bottle of it hanging around here, the it's a little fray check, and you can put that on the beginning, on the end of it, and that will stop it also from raveling. So I started and stopped quite a few places here, and that's what I did when I was starting and stopping, is I put the fray check, and you really don't see it. I don't think the color, the fabric just looks the same. You don't notice it. So fray check does a great job for that kind of stuff. And let's see, anybody else have any questions? I really hope that you go in and fill out that poll, because we're kind of all curious. What is it you think is the most impressive of this? Personally, I love, this kind of stuff is so artistic. And to think that we can do this with a serger is just, it blows my mind. So I love doing this, and I've had so much fun doing it. But I want to find out what's important for you. So make sure you go in and fill out that poll. And then the last question we have is, what foot do you use to line up your material? I used the blind hem foot. Now, if you have the Amber Air 400, I'm not sure with the Amber Air 400. There is a rolled hem with that. That's what I used on the Amber Air 600, was the rolled hem. And if you have the S200 250, it has actually a bar. It's got a place that it slides in, and so the fabric can line up against it. So we have some fabulous sergers. If you're interested, make sure you talk to them and go in and see what they're all about, because I've just been having so much fun with the Amber Air 600, and I love the fact that we can just select the stitch. We don't need to know anything, just like our sewing machine. We can select the stitch, we can select the fabric, and then our serger will completely choose the best settings for you. You can override it if you want to, but usually by doing that, it's going to give you the best settings. So I hope you've had fun. And I hope that you've got your mind buzzing about how you want to use your serger. I will try and post some pictures and answer some questions later on. So if there's anything else, please let me know. And I can't wait to see the results of the poll. So bye, everybody.